Let's talk about Kanto, the first Pokemon region, as well as the current topic for a lot of debate, discussion, and overall sadness. Now when it comes to Pokemon Switch rumors, a majority of them are claiming that Red and Blue are going to get a reboot for the next Pokemon game, and this has a lot of Pokemon fans pretty sad. Now the reason why they're invested into this is because it's not just like a couple of random troll posts on 4chan, or just some things that aren't completely backed up behind it, that notorious leakers like the Chinese Riddler, as well as other Riddlers, leakers, Pokemon influencers and stuff like that, they keep saying that, hey, it looks like we're getting signs and hints that a Kanto reboot is coming for the Nintendo Switch Pokemon game, and because of that, people are putting a lot of weight into it, and it sounds like a lot of the community is not happy about this decision, and that's why I'm making this video, because I think that all of that is really just founded in nonsense. For a lot of reasons as well. First off, there's still no credibility behind any of this. That even though a lot of posts are saying it, it could just be one post writing off another post, writing off another post from someone that was once credible but hasn't yet cemented their credibility for the Nintendo Switch Pokemon game. So because of that, it just seems like it's a really propagated rumor that doesn't have anything supporting it. Now another thing about it is that there's really no reason to be super scared, because I'm thinking about this like a Pokemon Stars approach. That the last time we had something that seemed credible about the Nintendo Switch Pokemon game, it actually didn't really amount to anything. Sources: Nintendo Switch to get Pokemon Sun and Moon version, and that was the whole Pokemon Stars thing for the Nintendo Switch after Pokemon Sun and Moon. This came from Eurogamer, and for some reason, a lot of people got their hopes up about this, and then when it didn't happen, they actually got upset at Nintendo or Game Freak for not creating such a game. Now I find this really weird, because back in 2016, people were actually a lot less happy to see a Pokemon Switch game, and even then, there's tons of people that hate that Pokemon is leaving the Nintendo 3DS because they can't afford Nintendo Switch, or they don't think that the Nintendo Switch is going to be as successful as a console for the 3DS. I completely disagree with all that. Nintendo Switch is killing it right now, and we absolutely need a graphics as well as hardware upgrade to run a modern Pokemon game. That was even one of the things that was said with like a lot of the Pokemon Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon interviews, that they pushed the game to its limits, and it still wasn't that fantastic of an end product. We try to consider what's going on with the modern game. So we upgrade the graphics, we upgrade the processing, and yeah, Nintendo Switch Pokemon game is going to be amazing. But back in 2016 when this rumor came out, a lot of people were still upset. Like, I saw thousands and thousands of hate comments saying that if Pokemon goes to Nintendo Switch, they will quit the series. So I honestly don't see this being that much of an impact. Now, another thing I don't understand is that Pokemon Stars was just a code name. Just like how Rainbow was a code name for Pokemon Sun and Moon, and there were other code names for other games that have been out throughout the history of Pokemon. So effectively, Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon is Stars, just not on the Nintendo Switch. And the other parts of the rumor weren't even that crazy. They said like new Alolan forms and 20 new Pokemon or stuff like that. When you break down Pokemon Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, we got 5 new Pokemon, 3 new forms, and then extra totems, which became playable characters. So I mean, technically, we got a lot of new Pokemon, even Zeraora and stuff like that, but then people weren't happy with it. So there really wasn't any disappointment from the Pokemon Stars rumor to Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon being released. That is where I'm kind of finding like a little bit of hope here. Say you absolutely hate the idea of a Kanto reboot. Well, now we know the worst case scenario. A lot of people were hyping themselves up with what's going on with Pokemon Stars or anything about the future games of Pokemon, and we've seen that with a lot of rumors for X and Y, Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, Pokemon Sun and Moon, Pokemon Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, even Pokemon Generation 8. That usually when it comes to a rumor, it's something heavily idealized. That's like, this is my dream. This is exactly what I want in Pokemon, and then people get super invested in that. Like, oh, if Pokemon doesn't put this fake rumor into the game, now I'm going to be against Game Freak. Now I'm going to be spited against the game for something that was never supposed to happen to begin with. And that's one of the problems about fake leaks and rumors and covering all the garbage that you find on 4chan. But in this case, I think it actually plays into our favor. Because if people are so against the Red and Blue remake, or Red and Blue Reboot, it's not a remake, I'm going to make that clear here in a minute. But if people are that much against the reboot, that means we can only go up from here. Brace yourselves for a reboot now as the worst case scenario, and then give Game Freak the chance to actually surprise you. If you end up enjoying the reboot, it works out, and if it ends up being not a reboot, that means, again, you can only go up from here, so the game's going to turn out better than you're currently expecting. Now with that out of the way, I want to add that it's really dumb to be against a Red and Blue reboot just on principle, that I haven't found any valid reason why this would be a bad idea for Game Freak Pokemon or that there'd be a reason to just hate it off the bat, just off of this idea of a rumor. For starters, it's not going to be a remake. People are saying, oh, we already had Red and Blue version or Yellow version, and then with Fire Red Leaf Green, Kanto already got its remake, so it doesn't need another one. Well, it's not going to be a remake. A reboot is going to take everything that Pokemon's built up to this point and then refresh it. A remake is effectively playing the same story on different graphics and a little bit of changes, so a reboot on the Nintendo Switch, which is already looking to be like one of the best Nintendo consoles of all time. Like, Nintendo is pulling no punches. They are not going to let Game Freak screw up at all, and even when you look at it, the Nintendo Switch is a console aimed at older players. It's aimed at the fans that grew up with their NES, their Super Nintendo, their N64, their GameCube, and all the stuff going to that, and it's really calling on that older player base. So giving a reboot for the first generation seems like the way to go. I honestly feel like it's going to be similar to Generation 5 in a way. Then when you look at Generation 5, the reason why it's so divisive is because it was a reboot of the franchise. That Game Freak pretty much accepted that a lot of their core players, that their early on players probably left the series, and because of that they wanted to rebrand Pokemon to try to get newer players in. That was successful to a degree, but it also meant that the players that were staying in with Pokemon, that held out all the way, they were going to feel slighted. That a lot of what Pokemon had built up to at that point kind of just went away. The Game Freak admitted that they did really good with the last 4 generations, and they had to kind of restart in some kind of way. So I feel that rebooting back to the first generation is kind of beneficial for everyone, except for maybe those Gen 5 fans that came in. But new players, they're going to get that original Pokemon experience, which is what built the franchise and brought us where we are now. And then older players, they're going to get that original Pokemon experience, but also in a new light that, if done correctly, means that everyone gets to be pleased. Now, one thing I'm tired of hearing is, oh, you're just a Gen 1er. You have those nostalgia glasses, you know, in the first generation has worse designs than the 5th generation, and it was just a bad story and bad like that, and because of that, you know, reboot would kill the franchise. I'm just gonna never play Pokemon again. And it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, well, there's also the reverse of nostalgia glasses, where you just kind of take your Pokemon experience and then crap on everything else. And that's like one of the really big issues I've seen with the 5th generation, is that it was so different. It was so divisive in the way that it was designed, that people are just love it or hate it for the most part, and then it kind of creates a lot of spite towards the fans that were already established, because then the new players, they feel like they want to take more from this. And the new players get upset at feeling inferior to the established player base, which I don't feel is justified at all. That if the players were already there, and they were already building up the community, building up the franchise, were there on the ground level, they put a lot more investment into it, so naturally, Generation 5 isn't going to come in at the same level of the existing foundation of Pokemon, but because of that, like, a whole just massive war is almost broken out between the community, and just created a ton of ignorance and backlash. That if anything references a first generation Pokemon, it's automatically inferior to a lot of the newer players, because they're tired of hearing how good the original foundation of Pokemon was, when again, it was strong enough to actually get us here and change the world. Either way, there's nothing wrong with paying respect to the original Pokemon games, especially when the Nintendo Switch is paying respect to the hardcore old school Nintendo players, so I feel that'd be a better business decision to get back the millions and millions of people that have grown out of Pokemon, get them back into Pokemon with something familiar. That's why Pokemon Go was so successful, and we can even see a lot of newer players being upset about that. Like, oh, Pokemon Go players, they only know about the original 151, or they haven't really kept up with Pokemon from there. Shouldn't we be happy that people are getting back into Pokemon and playing Pokemon and enjoying Pokemon again? Like, unfortunately, Pokemon Go, it only had the original Pokemon and is slowly integrating them. If we can bring someone back into the first generation games through a reboot in that kind of way, and then have them discover Pokemon all over again, because I think that's a key part. If you just dive into the 7th generation as an old fan, you're going to feel fairly outcasted, much like how the 5th generation fans felt outcasted when they dove into the 5th generation, and then realized that the established community wasn't really too receptive of the games that they first enjoyed. Now, because of that, I feel that a natural integration by putting everyone back at that same level, resetting everyone to the early days of Pokemon by making Kanto kind of the big start again, I feel would put everyone on an even playing field, and even those fans that fell out of it, they might discover and be like, yo, Garchomp's a really cool Pokemon, how did I miss him? Or even see some like 5th, 6th, and 7th generation Pokemon. Hey, I heard about this Mimikyu, I saw some of the memes, but my god, this thing's adorable, I love it. Or some of the, maybe even Pokemon that aren't super loved, but they make a connection to. I think that was the biggest problem about the 5th generation, that it disrespected that foundation of Pokemon. You dove into Gen 5, and then you had to befriend all of these new Pokemon designs, which felt really disingenuous to the designs of existing Pokemon, as well as just disingenuous to Pokemon in general. You weren't allowed to see anything except for 5th generation Pokemon, so you weren't allowed to reconnect reconnect with your past self, and if you didn't enjoy any of these new things, you were really going to be completely isolated. So I think that not isolating all kinds of players through a reboot is going to be the best way of doing that. And then that brings us to one of the last points, which is just ignorance against Kanto. Again, a lot of these newer players, they just look back and see anything that's old Pokemon as immediately bad, even though Kanto is one of the best regions because of the way that it's built, the way that you can explore it, as well as even the original story. People just say, oh, Pokemon Red and Blue had no story, but that's just looking over the actual story that exists. Again, this is where that reverse nostalgia glasses comes in. It's where if it's old, then it's bad, when really there's a lot of brilliance behind it. That even though it's a simple story, it's actually my favorite when it comes to Pokemon, that we have Giovanni, a Yakuza gang boss, running a gambling operation that's selling illegal Pokemon behind the scenes, with also attempts to take over the world by manufacturing the world's strongest Pokemon through his sheer wealth and mob dominance. You can tell a brilliant story through simplicity, and that's how Game Freak does it. Also, just the whole events at Lavender Town and the rest of the story, you know, just watching Pokemon Origins, watching Pokemon Generations, seeing the story unfold again, yeah, it's actually a really ingenious story. But then the region itself is also really nice because it has an effective tutorial level that once you get through the first couple of towns, like even then, Viridian City, you're already locked off. You're already told, no, the gym leader's not here. You're ready. You're out to go against the world. You want to sign up. You want to get into some gyms. You want to collect all 8 badges and become champion. Well, your first encounter with a gym is, sorry, guy's not here. Keep going. And then you're like, then that's where you find out, oh, there's power. There's power seeded throughout the entire region. That there's a lot of backtracking involved. There's a lot of exploration involved. And that's what makes the Kanto region so brilliant. That once you make it to Cerulean City and get past that, you're kind of free to do whatever you want. Like, you can skip Surge, and then there's a lot of freedom to how you can do the gyms from there. So imagine this from a reboot perspective, that even recently with the Red, Blue, Yellow Virtual Console, we've been to Kanto a lot, and we've experienced this song and dance many times before. So by opening up the region a bit more, instead of having the guard that needs a drink in your way or something, you can just go straight into Saffron City, and then you have a lot of branching options from there, or something like that, or at least change up the order, change up the significance of how the story goes into the gyms, and it doesn't have to be the same Team Rocket takeover. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here, and even if it is roughly the same, it's still not a bad experience at all. Now also, we're considering this from like a remake point of view, or a futuristic idea modernizing Kanto again. Well, the Sevi Islands were introduced in Fire Red Leaf Green, a lot of people love that. If we even look at Heart Gold Soul Silver, the Johto remakes. Johto is connected to Kanto. A Red and Blue reboot technically could give us back to the Kanto region. So instead of going Kanto or Johto to Kanto in reverse order, we go Kanto, Johto, maybe a new region. It depends on how much they want to put into Nintendo Switch and how large we can expand the Pokemon world with this next game. But Heart Gold Soul Silver, Safari Zone was introduced, so you can just kind of keep adding areas. So imagine the Kanto region. There's a lot unexplored to the north and even a lot unexplored to the south. Will we be able to visit the Orange Islands, take an anime approach and kind of canonize that into the games? Would we bring back the Sevi Islands because those have already existed inside of Fire Red Leaf Green? Again, Reboot gives us a lot more potential than just saying you're going back to Kanto, you're playing Red and Blue, don't get upset about it. This is going to be on Nintendo Switch with the modernization of Pokemon. That even when you consider Fire Red Leaf Green, that was Generation 3. So we're dealing with hundreds and hundreds of new Pokemon, mechanics, experiences, and stuff like that. So I don't really see how it could go bad, especially if we just take existing things and expand upon it. That Kanto, again, is a strong region, a very strong foundation for Pokemon, and there's really nothing wrong with it. From even an objective point of view, that it works as a region, it works for the story, and then building upon that for something like Nintendo Switch is just going to be pretty successful. And that was like thinking about the Pokemon timeline. You just play through it. That the Pokemon timeline already goes ahead like 10 plus years into Pokemon Sun and Moon. Now, depending on how far we're jumping ahead for the Pokemon Red and Blue reboot, we can end up at a really interesting part of Pokemon's history, or maybe just keep the timeline going, or maybe even set back a couple more years to something that happened before Team Rocket. And even then, like now things start getting really crazy and really complicated, because ever since Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire and Pokemon X and Y and Mega Evolutions, now there's also like a time-space axis, so we can have this linear time thing, but there's also extra dimensions where crazy things happen. So what I'm saying is, Kanto's just fine, and there's enough to work with Pokemon to justify a reboot for everyone. Make this an awesome thing for every Pokemon fan. Have every Pokemon fan be at an even footing, and then kind of mix in the new mechanics to make it one of the best Pokemon experiences we've ever seen, and then have extra exploration. That you can add new areas, you can expand the exploration inside the Kanto region, and I think it's going to go just great from there. Also, like I said, worst case scenario, this is just a rumor, it doesn't happen, and all you people that are upset about it, well, now you actually get a better experience. So we're pretty much at the bottom working up instead of over idealizing all these crazy rumors, and then we can only fall. So you guys enjoy the video. Hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.